Hey, this is Jeffrey Pepper Rogers here with another episode of Guitar Sessions. And today I want to talk about something really important that a lot of people ask about, which is how to speed up chord changes. And that is important not just when you're playing a fast progression like the one I was just doing from Paul Simon's Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, but it's also critical when you're playing music at any tempo in order to make it sound connected and smooth and not have awkward pauses and gaps when you change chords. So the key really is to be smart with fingerings. Now there are a lot of different ways you can finger chords, and the question of what is the best fingering is all dependent on context. What chord did you play right before it, and what chord are you going to next? Well, the goal here is really to make the moves very efficient so your hand doesn't have to move a lot. And you can make the notes and the chords connect more. So in this lesson, I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of how that plays out in some short little chord progression examples. So I'm going to start with this. Now, if you look at that first set of chords in example 1A there, I'm holding the G like this with my middle, index, and ring fingers. And then if I go to that C and back here, I'm going to play this little progression here, just like this. So if you watch my hand when I'm doing that, see how much my fingers are moving in order to go between that G and that C. I'm having to kind of reform the shape every time, right? So in contrast to that, take a look at example 1B, where I'm using this different fingering of G with my ring finger, middle finger, and pinky. And I'm going to play that same little progression and go between this G shape and C. You see how much less my fingers were moving. In fact, these two fingers just shifted over a string and then went back, hardly moving at all. And so that works much better in terms of efficiency and allows me to make that change. Now I'm doing that at a slow tempo, but I could do it a lot faster without having a kind of a pause. So we can take this idea even a little further, and let's say, so look at example 1C there. I'm starting off in this G fingering, using my pinky and the ring finger, middle finger. But in this C, I'm leaving the third fret on the first string fretted there. And that's a note that's in a C chord, so it doesn't change the chord. But what that allows is, well, just listen to what it sounds like first. So first of all, that is very efficient once again. But even more so than the last way I played it, you've got this note is a common note on the top. And when I have the opportunity to do that in changing chords, I really like to do it because there's a note that just rings out through the change. It kind of carries over. It's a common tone of these chords that sounds nice and kind of adds to the flow of it. And the other thing that it does is it provides an anchor. So not only are my fingers only moving a little bit, but this is keeping me right in the spot there. So that's always something to look out in chord changes. Is there a finger that you can kind of keep planted that allows you to kind of hone right in on that next shape really easily? So here's one other idea, just going from G to C. This is in this example 1D at the bottom of the screen here. So if I were to this time I'm using on the C, I'm keeping my ring finger in place there on the 6th string, and I'm gonna play that C now as a C over G, so it's a C with a G in the bass. So there's another place where I've got a common note on the bottom, and there might be a situation where that sounds nice. So it's not just a matter of efficiency, but it's a question of what the chords sound like as you move between them, what's happening with the voices. When you can have a note in common, that's really nice to have. So let's look at a couple other kinds of pairs of chords here. So now we're going to D and G. So first of all, in 2A, if I'm going between, I'm going to use the exact same little pattern I was using before. So D to G. So that's a ton of movement there. These are not great fingerings. I got to go. To do that, I got to move all over the fingerboard there. So that's not a great way to finger this. So by contrast, take a look at 2B here. Same regular old D shape, but on the G, I'm going to use this kind of G where I've got the 2nd and 1st string fretted at the 3rd fret. So it'll sound like this. So not only is that easier to form those shapes, but I'm keeping that note in place. That's a D note on the 2nd string under both chords. So I got this this common note ringing through, which sounds nice, and that also serves as an anchor. So a better way to play that progression for all those reasons. Now here are a couple other examples, and in example 3 here, let's say you're going F, C, D minor to G. So you could go play an F bar chord and then go to a C, but I like this way to do an F. So this is actually an F with C in the bass. So it's an inversion of an F chord, but it's just the same as that F bar chord, except I'm leaving out the 6th and the 1st string. And this is a shape I use all the time, because look at this, when I go from this one to C, I barely move at all. And I can leave a bunch of those fretted notes in place on the 2 chords. So that's a good change there. So then on the 2nd part of this one, I'm using a D minor shape like that with my pinky grabbing the 3rd fret on the 2nd string. And then I'm going to G, and when I do that, I'm going to reach for this other variation of how to finger a G, where the top note is going to be that D note on the 2nd string, just because I've got that under the D minor, and then I can leave it in place, go into the G. So hear what that sounds like when I put that together. Again, You can see there, I'm just kind of naturally not even fretting as many notes as I've shown in that chord diagram. I'm even simplifying a little further, not fretting the fifth string. So nice and smooth, easy, efficient, and musical sounding. So for that particular chord sequence, that's a fingering that works for me. So in example 4, so this is maybe a way to play a D chord that you may not use much, where I'm actually playing a little bar with my index finger on the third and first strings. So why would you play a D like that? Well, look what happens when I put it in the context of these other chords. So when I'm going from that D to B minor, that's a really nice and easy change because my first finger is kind of right in that bar shape already. And then this is the kind of G that makes sense based on where my fingers had been in that B minor. And then when I'm going to A, in this context, it makes sense to use that bar A shape because I'm kind of doing all these bars on these chords. So again, in the context of this particular chord sequence, this is a fingering that makes sense to me, that allows me to let notes ring for longer, that simplifies the change. So here's another little example on some minor chords. So E minor is another one that you can hold it down with your index and middle fingers, or with your middle and ring fingers, for instance. And in different contexts, it might make sense to do differently. So in this first progression, example 5 here, we've got A minor, so when I went from A minor to E minor, I'm leaving my middle finger planted on that change, so that's why it kind of made sense for me to finger the E minor that way. And then similarly, when I went to the G, I left my index finger planted, and then when I went back to E minor, I'm leaving, again, fingers in place. So throughout all those changes, I'm able to leave fingers planted. So that makes sense. So now in example 6, though, when I'm going from E minor to B7 to E minor, I'm going to use this fingering with my middle and ring finger, because when I go to B minor, when I go to B7, sorry, not B minor, I got the same middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, keeps me anchored. And then when I go to G, again, that 5th string middle finger is just going to stay planted. So I've got that common note through all those changes. All right, so let's take just a little look at the me and Julio example that I started off with. So first of all, a lot of people play A like this, going straight across, 1, 2, 3. If you're going fast like this, can hardly make my fingers do that. You can see how much movement kind of awkward movement is involved with that. So that's not how I want to play those changes. So instead, look at how I'm playing the A, which is an A fingering I use all the time, where the index finger is in the middle, and the middle and ring fingers are around it. One of the reasons that I like that fingering is because if I'm going to D, my index finger is an anchor. It's staying planted there. So that really helps me get right in position for that D. And then if I'm going from A to E, my index finger just has to slide down one fret and is kind of acting as a guide finger there. It's showing the way to get to that E shape, so that I can play this me and Julio example like this. And I can move through those changes quickly. So that is a far better solution than going like this and going like this. However, if you have a very good memory and you're very keen-eyed, you may have noticed that was not how I played it at the top of this lesson. I was using a bar A instead. And so this is yet another way that I might finger this, and that this would probably be my preferred way to do it. So if I use a bar A, I'd like to keep that kind of in place there. And here's another way to do a D. This is actually a D with an A on the bottom, a D over A. Where I can just add in those notes for the D on top of the bar, take it away, and go right back to it like that. So that's the way I was doing it at the top, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and. And there we go. That gets me right through that progression in an efficient fashion. I can go fast, and that really works. So as you learn songs, as you try to work out fingerings, think about being efficient, moving your fingers less, looking for common tones in chords that you can maybe keep planted. And sometimes there are notes that maybe aren't even in the chord normally that you might want to keep planted when you change chords. That's a subject for another lesson. So look for common fingers that you can keep in place over the chord change, and look for places where a finger can be a guide, that maybe it stays on the same string and slides down one fret, for instance. You can finger it a way that you can do that. Then you've got, you're planted on the fingerboard. It helps you get oriented. You get in place quicker for the new chord. So all the examples from this lesson with notation and tablature, not just the chord shapes, are over on Patreon. You can see the link in the description, as well as all the charts and tab and everything from all the examples in this lesson. You can join for as little as $2 and have access to all of that, as well as a bunch of other lessons, songs, and things over on Patreon. So have a look at that. Really appreciate your support. Subscribe, like the page, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.